Hello and welcome back for our noon session. It's going to be a tough act to follow after Mr. Harris there. So thank you so much for your comments and sharing your experiences. My name is Sabrina Chandler. I am the refuge manager of the Upper Mississippi River National Wildlife and Fish Refuge. That is part of the National Wildlife Refuge System that is managed under the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. I also supervise a number of other refuges along the Upper Mississippi River down to the Ohio confluence. I am very happy to be here with you today, and it is my pleasure to introduce Representative Betty McCollum to our session here on clean water and the connection to the Great River Road. Representative McCollum represents Minnesota's 4th District in the U.S. House of Representatives, and in 2000, Congresswoman McCollum made history as only the 2nd Minnesota woman elected to serve in Congress since statehood in 1858. Her district includes Minnesota's capital city, St. Paul, as well as Ramsey County and most of Washington County. Protecting clean water and air, wild lands, and our nation's natural treasures for future generations are among Representative McCollum's top priorities as she currently chairs the Interior Environment Appropriations Subcommittee. Her work with the subcommittee includes a recent effort to establish a restoration and resiliency initiative on the Mississippi River, similar to those associated with the Great Lakes and the Chesapeake Bay. She's also a co-chair of the Mississippi River Caucus. Unfortunately, Representative McCollum was pulled away for votes as the House is in session today, and so she's provided a pre-recorded message for us, and we're going to go ahead and share that with you now, and then we'll continue our session. Please introduce. There you go.
Hi, I'm Betty McCollum, and if you're watching this, it's nothing short of a miracle. We didn't know with votes what was going to be happening. The Parkway Commission is very important to me, and I recorded this by myself on my iPhone, sent it to Amanda, and hopefully we've got good quality and we're able to connect a little bit. So I'm sorry I'm not there with you in person. And thank you so much for the invitation to join you literally virtually and for your leadership in the Mississippi Parkway Commission. It's a special pleasure to join you to talk about what I think is America's greatest river. As a former member of the Mississippi Parkway Commission and as a person who grew up in South St. Paul, Minnesota, right on the banks of the Mississippi River. I want to thank you all for your dedication to the Parkway, and I believe it deserves to be designated an all-American road. Now, we know that for millennia, the Mississippi River has been an enduring and defining feature of North America. It is literally the heartland of our nation. It begins in the cold glacial waters of the North Woods of Minnesota, weaving some 2,000 miles through vast plains to warm southern shores of the Delta. It unites North and South. It unites East and West, and it directly links 10 very special states. It drains into watersheds of 31 states and provides drinking water for 20 million Americans. And I'm one of the 20 million who drink Mississippi River water. It generates jobs and economy activity that surpasses none. And it does that through shipping and recreation and tourism and culture. And it is a vital flyaway for nearly 60% of North America's migratory birds, and so much other wildlife depend upon the Mississippi River. Now, despite major progress to clean up the Mississippi River since the passage of the Clean Water Act, America's river is still in a state of decline. We know that. We know that there's more flooding, there's less wildlife, there's fewer jobs, and there's often been reduced recreational opportunities, and higher costs for keeping communities safe and ensuring that they have clean drinking water. The Mississippi River is our treasure, and it's up to us to work together to protect it. And during these extraordinary times of pandemic, the needs are so much greater. We need to build back, and we need to build better, investing in the health of Americans, our environment, green infrastructure, and the economic health of our communities, creating a new standard of care that will leave the Mississippi even better today and in great shape for future generations. That's the central part of the work that we need to do together. Now, today, there are more than a dozen federal agencies and 75 federal programs, scores of state and local agencies and private non-sector partners, and they're working on the Mississippi River. And often the work gets complicated, and sometimes it's even run at cross purposes. So 10 years ago, I authorized the Mississippi River Special Resources Study, and I worked that through the National Park Service to inventory public and private entities along the river, helping to preserve its natural treasures and recognizing the Mississippi's historic and cultural value to America. And it's important to me. I'm a history teacher, so I know how historic information can lead to making good future decisions. Now, as chair of the Interior Appropriations Subcommittee, I want to work with partners like you to fulfill this in a much broader vision now. The Mississippi River and Restoration Resilience Initiative to enhance funding and coordination from the headwaters to the Gulf. And we're doing that to sustain our great river. The success of programs, if you think about it, you've all heard about them: Puget Sound, Chesapeake Bay, the Everglades, and notably closer to home in the bold north, the Great Lakes. We have shown that this dedicated funding can create great results. The ability to grow and sustain partnerships, and it also provides a reference by using these regional resources that have been developed in the past, how to assemble meaningful, progressive, projects that yield all kinds of benefits, not only for our country, but for the local communities. So the Mississippi River Resilience Initiative is collaborative, and it's coming together with the leadership of the National Wildlife Federation and Friends of the Mississippi River, and so many other friends, many of you here in this room. This is collaboration that grows, and we've begun drafting the scope of the outline of the potential. And here are the initials, folks. Everybody gets initials eventually. The MRRRI initiative. So what I did in 2021 in the appropriations bill, I started to lay a legislative foundation. In July, the House passed $36.8 billion FY21 Interior Environmental Funding Bill, which represents the largest investments in our environment and our communities since 2010. Now, this bill is going to move us forward by investing in other resources and ways that keep our communities safe and healthy, and investing in the protection and preservation of our landscapes and our biodiversity. It makes significant investments in protecting and preserving our public lands and building resilience into climate change and strengthening America's environmental workforce and ensuring access to safe, clean drinking water. The bill also recognizes the Mississippi River from Minnesota to Mississippi and Louisiana as a vital American waterway. It directs the EPA to establish a Mississippi River Restoration and Resilience Strategy in coordination with other federal agencies as well as local, state, and tribal governments, along with businesses and nonprofits. By taking this inventory of existing federal and state investments and everything that is happening in the Mississippi River Basin, identifying gaps, and then making recommendations for sound policy actions. When we do that, we can better leverage our work on improving water quality, restoring habitat, natural systems, improving navigation, eliminating aquatic invasive species. That's something that's united a lot of us here in Congress, and building local resilience to natural disasters, which we know we face, both with flooding up north, flooding in the south, and then all these storm significant events are creating a lot of pressure on a lot of communities, and we need to work together to reduce that. These provisions are laid out in a foundation, and it's the first step that will be followed up by legislation that will authorize the Mississippi River Initiative. Now, moving forward on this vision, some of the most important commitments to the Mississippi River will be made by citizen commissioners, by county boards, by city councils, by people like you. We also want to make sure that science will drive our decisions, and that means that we need to work closely with our universities, who can be the heart of the laboratory work that needs to be done. The motivation to put this all together, well, it's going to come from a lot from working with our nonprofit advocates. We need to build a sustainable partnership that involves everyone in this new virtual room. So I want to thank you for your work to invest in this great American roadway that links communities rooted in a great American river. Partnership starts with communities, and I'm committed to work with you, and I will continue to be a partner for you in Congress. So let's work together for the funding and the research that we need to jumpstart a new national commitment to the Mississippi River. I look forward to hearing your feedback, to working with your great organization here, and hopefully to meet many of you in person, those of you I haven't met yet, in the year to come. I wish everyone safe health and all the best as you continue your meeting. Thank you for including me. Goodbye.
Thank you to Representative McCollum. We're sorry that she couldn't be here, but what a great message and what a great initiative that she's got and the work that she's doing there with the Interior Environment Committee to make sure that the issues that we care most about on the Mississippi River are being addressed. Before I introduce some of our other speakers, I just wanted to kind of share a couple of examples. Representative McCollum mentioned the partnerships and the work that's already ongoing within the Mississippi River. Specifically on the Upper Mississippi River, we have the Upper Mississippi River Restoration Program, and that was the first environmental restoration and monitoring program that was undertaken on a large river system in the United States. It was first authorized under the Water Resources Development Act in 1986. Today, that program is managed by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers in partnerships with the state of Missouri, Illinois, Iowa, Wisconsin, and Minnesota, along with the U.S. Geological Survey, the EPA, the Natural Resource Conservation Service, and my agency, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. The UMRR program, as we refer to it, it's become one of the most important efforts up to now, committed to ensuring the viability and the vitality of the Upper Mississippi River system and the diverse and significant fish and wildlife resources since the establishment of the Upper Mississippi River National Wildlife and Fish Refuge in 1924. We work in combination with both habitat restoration activities along with monitoring and research. The monitoring and research is executed through a program we call the long-term resource monitoring element. And then we have projects that are completed and constructed under the habitat rehabilitation and enhancement projects. Both of those help us really advance Congress's vision of the Upper Mississippi River system as a nationally significant ecosystem and a nationally significant commercial navigation system. As Representative McCollum mentioned, there are still many outstanding restoration and information needs for the Mississippi River, and we are working towards that and look forward to the opportunity to create this larger program for the entire river where we can continue to try to meet the needs of that just amazing resource. A lot of the resources of the Upper Mississippi River have benefited from this program, and we anticipate that the work of the new initiative would just further that. When we're talking about water quality and clean water, as the Congresswoman mentioned, we all depend on that, not just for the critters and the drinking water aspect, but also for our local economies. We've got a lot of experience in the monitoring and the aspects that we've seen where we have seen those improvements, but we do have a long way to go. In 2000, we constructed a project at the Trempealeau National Wildlife Refuge just north of La Crosse, Wisconsin. And at the time, the water quality in the Mississippi River was not such that we could use it to fulfill our habitat needs within that National Wildlife Refuge. And so we utilized water from the Trempealeau River. Now, 20 years later, our water quality issues have been compounded due to a decline in the water quality from the Trempealeau, and the water quality in the Mississippi is now much better and has significantly improved in that time frame. However, we're still trying to address the needs of the system, and we depend on a lot of our local communities and, of course, our legislatures to help us get those objectives met. So the next speakers that I'd like to introduce really have been key to helping us further some of that advancement. And so the National Caucus of Environmental Legislators, or NCEL for short, because we all love our acronyms in the government, is a nonpartisan network of legislative champions that works to protect, conserve, and improve natural and human environment. The NCEL believes that the key to advancing sound policy in the states is well-informed legislatures with strong champions who can advocate on the behalf of environment, develop shared strategies, and collaborate with peers across the country. The NCEL created the Mississippi River Legislative Caucus to assist legislatures in representing river districts and their colleagues committed to a thriving, healthy Mississippi River. The goal of the caucus is to build a capacity of legislators in those districts to help address river health and water quality issues and create a forum for collaboration on growing communities. I'm really excited to introduce to you today, representing NCEL, Yinka Bode George, who is an environmental health advocate, and she is passionate about creating health equity, environmental justice, and sustainable development through public policy and community building. Yinka believes that understanding the relationship between people and natural spaces is the key to environmental protection, and she works to advance public health through a lens of racial equity. Yinka received her Master's of Health Science degree in Environmental Health from Johns Hopkins School of Public Health, and I am very excited to welcome her to continue our conversation here about the work that NCEL is doing. So please help me welcome Yinka to the conversation.
Thank you, and hi everyone. It's great to be here today. So yes, I am Yinka. I'm the Environmental Health Manager for NCEL. And I just want to take a second to thank MRPC for inviting us to join and share NCEL's appreciation of our work together. We have to do this work through partnership. We really value our partnership. So I want to give a quick shout out to Elena Chuni, one of our newest NCEL colleagues and the coordinator of the Mississippi River Legislative Caucus. I also want to acknowledge my other colleagues here today, Altanai Karasapan and Jane Krentz. We are here representing NCEL. So now I want to introduce Representative Jay Hardaway, one of NCEL's legislative champions and Mississippi River Legislative Caucus members, who's going to offer some reflections. Representative Hardaway represents Tennessee's 93rd District, and we're so grateful to have his leadership. So Rep. Hardaway, I will turn things over to you.
Well, thank you, Yinka. And good afternoon to everyone. On behalf of the NCEL and on behalf of our MRLC, I want to express the appreciation from the legislators and from the staff for the opportunity to communicate with you about how we coordinate going forward to further advance the health of the ecosystem, which of course fosters the opportunities for our cities, our towns along the Mississippi, from Minnesota down to Louisiana, to take advantage of the tourism, the sports, the hunting, the fishing, things that pull people to the river in the community aspect, but also help to drive commerce. My involvement with NCEL goes back to that year. And let's just say I've been with the legislature since 2007. I'll let y'all figure the rest out. But the opportunity to sit and have conversation and be able to be educated on things that I don't know, that I need to know about the river, about where we were years ago in terms of the status of the health of the river, where we are today, how we got here, where we want to be going forward 10 years from now, 20 years from now, when my children, my grandchildren should have the opportunities to take advantage of the same activities and get the same enjoyment from the Mississippi River that I got and that my children got as they were younger. Caught the first fish out of that Mississippi River. They got on their first boat on the Mississippi River. They haven't done the skiing. They haven't done some of the other more challenging activities. But the Mississippi has proven to be a vital part of their upbringing, even to the point of, I'm also part of a charter school organization. And what we've looked at recently is how do we start to advance the improvements and the modification of our educational system with outdoor classrooms. And the Mississippi River is part of our future engagement in that aspect, setting up classrooms that will involve not just the view, but the ecosystem becomes a part of our laboratory for classroom instruction. The opportunities that NCEL and our Mississippi River Legislative Caucus have to work with the projects that are ongoing, that the federal government is initiating from their standpoint, that the local communities are initiating. We serve as that great facilitator in between the locals and the feds, whether it's about the appropriations that flow through. We sometimes have the last say-so on just how those dollars are earmarked. So it's important that we are part of the conversation of the local part of the conversations with the feds. I thank Congresswoman McCollum for her presentation. It's encouraging to know that we have that type of champion in DC, both knowledgeable and courageous enough to push our agenda forward. The things that I think that we can work together on going forward, the projects that are going to enhance tourism and river access, while we're simultaneously increasing the health of the Old Man River and the resilience of the river, and coming back from we've been abusive. We let those pesticides and herbicides run into the Mississippi, that storm water that's toxic to the fish and the wildlife. We haven't been good protectors, but we're doing better, and we can do more, and we can do it faster, working in concert with each other. So strengthening that coordination between legislators and the MRPC, that's what's going to allow the needs of the Mississippi River to be addressed as we develop the policies. We know that in order for any of this to become a reality, there's going to have to be some changes in statute. There's going to have to be some rules promulgated. There's going to have to be some administrative policies put in place, and that's where we come in. But once again, whether we're coordinating off to the side with our local legislators, or whether we're coordinating off to the other side with our federal legislators and the executive branches, of course. So if we can get together and develop the programming, develop the communications, whether it's petitions, whether it's sign-on letters, whether it's jointly crafted legislation, then that's what we're here for. We came to do the work. So we're looking forward to the future in helping to care for that great Mississippi River, one of the greatest treasures in the nation, in the world. And these 10 states just happen to be in charge of taking care of it. And we're going to do a better job, but we're going to do it together. So thank you, Yinka.
Thank you, Rep. Hardaway. And I just want to, kudos to you for being such a great legislative champion. And as you said, the priorities of our network of the MRLC include soil health and clean water, agriculture, flood mitigation and resilience, along with outdoor recreation and accessibility. Thanks.
So Yinka, thank you for mentioning those priorities. Representative Hardaway, I have to go ahead and take this time to say I was doing a little research and of course some quick Google searches, and I actually, not only do we share a home state of Mississippi, we share a birthday. So I'm really excited about hearing all the great work that you're doing and thinking that maybe, we're like a little bit more connected than what we think. So
I'm feeling it. It's good to have a twin.
Likewise, Geminis, we stick together that way.
Absolutely.
So Yinka mentioned some of the overall priorities of the caucus. Could you share with us a couple of things that you're working on directly through the caucus, if you don't mind?
Oh, absolutely. I think, we can go up and down the list, but I think at the top of the list is the environmental justice concept, the issues that impact those who are at the lower rung of the socioeconomic scale, and quite frequently those are communities of color, but even more frequently it's those who don't have the wealth, the income to be able to fight the river, nor fight the government that's imposing policies that put them in peril. We've got to look at how the climate change and flood mitigation, how does it impact those who can't get out of the way? How does it impact those who are going to lose their livelihood if they don't lose their lives disproportionately, merely because they can't afford to do anything differently? So protecting them and making sure that environmental justice, and I've got an old classmate, Judge Gwen Rooks, she's retired now, but her favorite saying to those who came before her, begging for justice, was be careful, because justice is what you deserve, not what you want. And I would say that those folks who are disproportionately impacted by the negative aspects of our river management, whether you call yourself an environmentalist or call yourself a conservationist, you must be concerned about the least of these. And our job is to make sure that equity being a little different from equality, equity is when you get what you need out of public policy, that we're able to establish a system, mechanism that delivers equity to those communities that live up and down the river and depend upon it for their lives and their livelihood, who may be able to enjoy it for the sports and the hunting and fishing as far as recreational needs. But quite frequently, it's the way and the reason that they live. So environmental justice and the bills that we push to look after those people, to offer programs that will help them to become better neighbors to the river, better partners with the river, to allow them to have better ways to petition their government when they know they're being imposed on. That's I think it's the priority for me going forward. If we look at the second thing, I used to be a little ignorant and thinking that the majority of the problems with the river were coming from the farmers and the runoff from the herbicides and pesticides coming from ag. Then I became the urban ag expert on Capitol Hill, and come to find out it's not just farmers, but we're doing more than our fair share of pollution out of the cities with our stormwater that's running off of these beautiful lawns that we've sprayed down with so many herbicides and pesticides. So we've got a lot of work to do. We've got to understand that the urban-rural Mississippi River inhabitants are closely connected. It's all about the river, old man river. Just keeps rolling along, and our job is to make sure that it's rolling for the next generation.
Thank you, sir. That's great information and definitely a worthwhile cause, no doubt. I think you know, the concepts that you've mentioned, they go beyond just the actual, okay, yeah, the water is clean enough to drink, or yeah, people have access. It's more of that engagement with the river and actually providing those opportunities. So I appreciate that. For our audience today, I'm just curious, and Yinka, maybe you have something that you could recommend as well, but most of the folks on this meeting today are affiliated with local communities or businesses. Obviously, they're not government employees or legislators. What would be the best recommendation that you could provide either to engage in efforts like what you've discussed, or to advance other initiatives that they feel would be beneficial to the river system? Yinka or Representative Hardaway, either one of you have anything to add there?
I'll let Yinka take it and I'll fill in the blanks.
Awesome. I love it. So I think that's great. And, you know, we're in a very pressing time as a country. I think, especially in the river region, there's been, you know, unprecedented challenges from the pandemic to economic losses, extreme weather events, and so forth. I think all of this is calling for us to do two things. The first thing is to recognize the fact that all of these issues and challenges are very connected to one another. And so when we're taking approaches with advocacy strategies, policy making, we have to take an interdisciplinary lens on the work that we're doing. I've been hearing a lot of folks say, you know, environmental matters aren't really going to take priority next session and things like that. I really want all of us to lean into the fact that these issues are connected and speak about them and take those strategies in that very well-connected understanding. So like Rep. Hardaway was saying, you know, if we're talking about outdoor activities, we have to talk about the ways access matters. We have to talk about the ways, you know, health matters and community resilience matters, and really look at these issues holistically. The second thing I will say, thinking about folks who want to be champions of this issue themselves, it's really important for us to think about ourselves as advocates. Get to know your representatives, get to know your legislative champions, and work through partnerships to make sure that they understand your priorities as constituents and as environmental advocates yourself. We, on our website, please check us out, ncel.net, .org, sorry. You can find an array of one-pagers, fact sheets, and other resources to be well informed. So empower yourself, learn as much as you can about topics, connect with other advocates who are doing this work, and then connect with your representatives to have conversations about what their legislative capacities could be. So that's what I'll say. Rep. Hardaway.
Well, I think you hit a couple of good points. The one that I want to reiterate is how important it is for the community, those citizens who are not in elected office or appointed office. You've got two choices. You can sit around and agonize and cry, or you can get up and organize and try. One of those will make a difference. And the opportunities for citizens now, even though you're doing a lot through the virtual communications, opportunities to impact and to cause change now for the betterment, it's greater than ever. As we get tied into the virtual communication sphere, it empowers the consumer, it empowers the citizen more so than ever. You're able to set up and communicate with elected officials and with appointed officials whom you wouldn't have been able to get a physical meeting with last year this time. But now, all of a sudden, we have more time because we're not traveling, we're not setting up. We hit that button and here we are. We're able to do what we're supposed to be doing, and that's to make ourselves available to the citizens. So I would encourage the citizenry, you got to get organized in order to be effective advocates. You should be communicating with your state legislators. You should be communicating with your local legislators, city council, county commissioners, school board representatives. We talked about how the educational system can benefit during this pandemic crisis by engaging with activities along the ecosystem of the Mississippi River. And the feds have the money, right? Unfortunately, even when they don't have the money, they can print some. And that's as important as anything else, having access to the funding. But those ideas and the concerns that the citizens have, their ability to petition the government, it's more in line now with what the original constitutional framers had than ever. You can get to me. You can get to Congresswoman McCollum. You can get to your U.S. senators, etc. Make use of it. Petition your government. Get a few thousand folks online to sign petitions, but also get those few thousand folks online to hold your own virtual town halls and pull in your elected officials. That's the future. That's what this COVID-19 crisis has driven us to. Even though it's created quite a few catastrophes, it's on the other side, it's created quite a few new opportunities for us to learn how to build, as you referred to it earlier, build a better America, build a better Tennessee, a better Minnesota, Mississippi, Louisiana, et cetera, all up and down that Mississippi. So I thank you again for the work that you've done. I appreciate my colleagues from NCEL, my Tennessee colleagues from the state legislature. I appreciate my Mississippi River Legislative Caucus members. And I'm so happy to engage with my brand new friends, okay? So as soon as I can figure out all of the acronyms, I'm gonna be sending y'all thank you letters.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I want to we got just a little more time here, if it's okay to kind of continue this conversation. Both of you kind of touched on a little bit the connectedness. The Fish and Wildlife Service in particular and the National Wildlife Refuge System, we are working with some outreach efforts, but But one thing that we've realized, and you know, sticking with the topic of this session of clean water and connecting that to the Great River Road, when people drive down the road, they see the river, it's beautiful. You know, this background picture here is of Pool 8 in the Upper Mississippi River National Wildlife Refuge System. You know, we really love those views, but unless people are seeing it, they don't have that connectedness, and they don't realize that they need to appreciate it, and they don't understand that they need to do something to make sure that that resource is available in the future. And so we work a lot to bring people to the river and have them get that appreciation and that understanding so that we can further some of those efforts. And I know a lot of the members here and the participants in this meeting, outreach is one of their primary objectives. Is there outreach that either of you do to try to increase that connectivity to the river and the benefits that it brings to ensure that we have folks in future generations to take care of the resource? Is there anything you could add to that?
Well, I'll be happy to take the first crack at that. We have some public land that's governed by the state parks that adjoin the Mississippi. State Representative Barbara Cooper is the legislator that represents the particular park that I'm speaking of now. And it's the only, not just the first, but it's the only state park that's named after an African American. So it's important that we look at how we get our young Black folks down to that park so that they can have a chance to engage nature. And that nature starts with that river. Sabrina, I was thinking as some of the speakers were on today, I was thinking about the cultural aspect. I was thinking about the historical aspect. There's so much that river tells us, not just about the river, but what it tells us about ourselves. The fact that without that river, we may or may not be the incredible nation that we are today. The ability to navigate the river while moving enormous loads of timber and cotton back in the day. That was important. That was important to contributing to the economic success of the young America. The ability today to look at commerce and how the new crises that are a result of the COVID-19, the new economic crises, how some jobs are going away completely, how the ability to access products and services has changed, a new norm. That river is still going to be the lifeline for the states up and down there. One of the projects that we're working on in Memphis Shelby County is how to start engaging our containers that are going down to the mouth of the Mississippi and being loaded for movement overseas. How do we start to engage more companies, more manufacturers, more ag producers with that container business, which means with those barges? There's something about that waterway that is going to survive generations and generations. We just have to be good managers, but we'll see that it will tell us more about ourselves historically than it's going to tell us about it when we start studying it. So I think looking at the educational opportunities, from taking the students down to the park to creating, as we talked about earlier, those outdoor laboratories, those classrooms where children are going to be able to breathe their fresh air, don't worry as much about the COVID-19 crisis and the social distancing aspect, because you've got room, you've got fresh air flowing, and you've got that automatic connection to your laboratory, the whole ecosystem of the Mississippi River. So those are things that we're doing in Memphis, Shelby County, and then Tennessee. We're also reaching out to create different forms of travel, but it's once again, it's going back to the past and pulling what was good then up to now. So what's old is new again. And that's those Mississippi River boats where you can sleep and eat and drink and be merry from Louisiana up to Minnesota and back again. Those boats are back. We have a landing in Memphis for the company that's running them. So it's back to them old days. What was good then is now making a comeback. A lot of the cruise lines aren't doing so well, but this company is prospering. What's old is new again, that Mississippi River.
Thanks, Rep. Hardaway. And I'll just add, we think that community organizing, that approach is very critical. We just brought on Elena to specifically focus on the Mississippi River and our legislators there for that sole purpose of dedicating time and energy in bridging those relationships and building networks. I think as far as, connecting folks who don't live in proximity to those natural spaces to them, I think it really includes strategies like making relevant issues of the river to folks who don't live so close to it. I actually live in Baltimore City, Maryland, and we're a very urban environment, but making the connections to the Chesapeake Bay is something that I use to make relevant to my neighbors and community members. Things like, the trash that we have here could end up at the bay. And then, from the perspective of instilling that appreciation for natural spaces, we have our local spaces, we have our local activities, right? And it's a matter of communicating how our local activities connect to the broader or spaces that aren't very close to us, so environment, everything is connected, it's all interrelated. That's what I'll add to Rep. Hardaway's comments.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I think, it is that importance and building that appreciation, and then all of the efforts that go into following through with what comes from the appreciation, I think is critical. And you don't have to be directly on the river to benefit from the river, as Representative Hardaway talks about, that lifeline, that economic driver that the river provides as well is something that's critical to all of us. So definitely appreciate the interactions with the two of you today, and appreciate Representative McCollum taking time to record the video, even though she wasn't able to be with us live. I do want to point folks to the chat because Yinka, I believe some of your colleagues have been posting some great links for some more information about NCEL and where to find out information about the Mississippi River Legislative Caucus. So I would make sure that folks take a good look at that and cut and paste some of those links if you're interested in that information. But thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedules to join us today and sharing all the great work that you're doing. And I think we are on a break until 1 p.m. and we're going to talk about the promise of multimodal Great River Road travel. So thank you so much for your time, and we look forward to all the great work that you're doing.